September 1st, 1985.
1:05 a.m.
The middle of the North Atlantic. 2 miles beneath the frozen, crushing weight of the ocean. Inside the cramped, dimly lit control room of the research vessel Nor. The air is thick with stale coffee and the hum of overheating electronics. For weeks, Dr. Robert Ballard and his team have stared at grainy monitors, watching a never-ending desert of mud and sand flicker past. The silence is broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical ping of the sonar. A heartbeat in a graveyard. Then it happens. A shadow emerges from the darkness. At first, it's just a blur, a glitch in the feed. But as Argo glides closer, the debris takes shape. A massive, rusted cylindrical object, encrusted with salt. It is a boiler, a Scotch boiler, identical to the ones that once powered the largest ship ever built. It was never supposed to be found, Ballard would later whisper. The ocean floor here is a place of perpetual night. For 73 years, the RMS Titanic had been a ghost. But there it was, looming out of the gloom, the massive silhouette of the bow section. You step closer to the screen, your breath hitching. The ship doesn't look like a wreck. It looks like a monument, where billionaires once stood to watch the horizon, draped in eerie, hanging fringes of iron-eating bacteria. But as the team celebrates, a chilling realization settles over the room. The ship is not whole. It is mutilated. For 7 decades, official history insisted it sank intact. But the sight on the monitor tells a different, violent story. The stern is gone, located nearly 2,000 feet away, mangled beyond recognition as if through a gargantuan shredder. This discovery immediately shatters the official testimony of 1912. You notice the small things, the things that shouldn't be there. A silver platter resting on the silt, polished by the sand. A single leather boot, marking the spot where a soul once stood. The debris field stretches for miles, a trail of breadcrumbs, leading to a tragedy that the world thought it understood. But as the cameras pan over the hull, something feels off. The damage doesn't look like a simple scrape against ice. There are strange buckles in the steel, rivets popped like corks. A suspicious lack of a 300-foot gash from the iceberg. Was the steel brittle? Was the construction rushed? Or was the ship that hit the iceberg even the Titanic at all? Flickering footage of the empty bridge, where Captain Smith made his final stand. The discovery hasn't answered the questions. It has unearthed new ones. The silence of the wreck is deafening. Listen closely to the echoes in the metal, whispers of a cover-up. Something made explorers stop their excavation and keep finding secret. The accident might have been a calculated outcome. Argo begins its slow ascent back to the surface. Why were the most crucial pieces of evidence buried so deep? To understand why the Titanic lies in pieces 2 miles down, we must travel back in time. Away from the silent abyss and into the deafening roar of the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, 1911. The air here is thick with the smell of molten rivets and coal smoke. You stand in the shadow of 2 giants, identical in nearly every way, the Olympic and the Titanic. But as you look closer at the Olympic, the older sister, you notice something. She is limping. Months before, the Olympic had been involved in a devastating collision with the HMS Hawk. The impact had torn a massive hole in her hull and twisted her central turbine. The Olympic was a financial disaster that Lloyd's of London refused to insure. In the mahogany-paneled boardrooms of London, the atmosphere was one of panic. J.P. Morgan, the American titan who owned the line, faced a catastrophic loss. Unless the unsinkable brand could be salvaged through a daring, cold-blooded deception. Imagine the shipyard at night, veiled in the thick Irish fog. A skeleton crew of workers, sworn to secrecy, moving between the 2 massive hulls. The Olympic was hull 400. The Titanic was hull 401. They were virtually indistinguishable. Would you send your pristine ship, or the damaged Olympic disguised as her sister, and ensure she met with an accident that would trigger a massive insurance payout? As you walk the decks on April 10, 1912, you notice inconsistencies. The Titanic was designed with 14 portholes on the port side of her sea deck. Yet, at Southampton, photographs revealed she suddenly had 16. Why would a brand new ship undergo such a structural change at the last minute? Unless the ship at the dock was actually the Olympic, hastily patched and repainted. The suspicion deepens when you look at the passenger manifest. J.P. Morgan himself was scheduled to be on the maiden voyage. At the very last second, he canceled, claiming he was in poor health. Yet, days later, he was spotted in France, seemingly perfectly fine with his mistress. Over 50 high-profile passengers canceled their trip of a lifetime just hours before departure. It was as if a silent alarm had been tripped in the upper echelons of society. They knew the ship they were stepping onto was a ghost, a sacrificial lamb. You can feel the tension in the boiler rooms as the ship hits the open sea. There is a persistent fire in coal bunker number 6, raging since before Belfast. Why would Captain Edward Smith head into ice fields with a fire weakening the bulkhead? Some say the fire was an excuse to speed up, but others suggest it was a ticking time bomb. As the sun sets on April 14th, the Titanic is pushing 22 knots through warnings. Wireless operators are tossing aside telegrams warning of bergs and growlers. They are focused on sending frivolous messages for the wealthy passengers. Was the speed not a quest for a record, but a race to reach a rescue ship? The SS Californian was waiting, stopped in the ice that night. Carrying no passengers, only 3,000 wool blankets and sweaters. Why would a cargo ship be sitting idle, waiting for a distress signal? You begin to realize that the tragedy might not have been errors, but synchronized events. If the plan was for a controlled sinking and a safe rescue, something went catastrophically wrong. The coordinates were miscalculated. The Californian sat 10 miles away watching, doing nothing while the unsinkable ship began her final plunge. But the most damning evidence isn't in boardrooms. It is found on the seabed. When divers reached the propellers of the wreck, they found a serial number. It wasn't 401, it was 400. If the ship at the bottom of the Atlantic is the Olympic, then where is the real Titanic? And why does the British government still keep certain files sealed under the Official Secrets Act? The truth remains buried in the deep, a chilling reminder of corporate greed, a sacrifice of 1,500 souls for a cold-blooded deception. Deep on the Atlantic seabed, a haunting discovery challenges everything we know about the Titanic. An explorer's camera captures serial number 400, a number that actually belongs to its sister ship, the Olympic. This clue opens a door to a dark, financial labyrinth hidden beneath the waves. To understand why, we must follow the trail of money and desperate corporate maneuvers. Picture a dimly lit boardroom in 1911, thick with the scent of expensive tobacco. The White Star Line, once the pride of the British fleet, was bleeding money. Their grand vision, the Olympic-class liners, had become a financial nightmare. The Olympic, the firstborn, had collided with the HMS Hawke, leaving her severely damaged. The Royal Navy ruled the Olympic was at fault. Insurance wouldn't pay a cent. Structurally compromised and leaking money, the ship was now a permanent lame duck. This is where the theory of the Great Swap takes root. Two identical ships side by side. One a broken liability, the other a brand new asset. The temptation for a switch was astronomical. The plan: swap identities, sink the damaged ship, and collect the insurance payout. But how do you hide a transformation of this scale from thousands of workers? Look closer at the photographic evidence. The discrepancies begin to scream. Titanic was designed with 14 portholes on its sea deck. Olympic had 16. Yet, in Southampton, photographs of the Titanic show 16 portholes. Even more haunting are the accounts of the sailors. A strange flu hit the crew. Desperate men suddenly refused to sign onto the Titanic. They whispered in pubs about nameplates being swapped in the dead of night. Then, there is the matter of the missing guests. J.P. Morgan, the titan who owned the line, canceled at the last minute. He claimed he was gravely ill, yet days later he was spotted healthy in France. Milton Hershey and several other Morgan associates also pulled out. Did they know something the 1,500 souls left on board did not? As you dive deeper, the accident starts to look like a botched execution. Enter the SS Californian, the only other vessel in the vicinity that night. Strangely, it carried no passengers, only 3,000 wool sweaters and blankets. It had stopped in the middle of an ice field, its engines off, waiting. Was the Californian meant to be the rescue ship for a controlled sinking? But a tragic miscalculation occurred. The Titanic struck the ice too hard. In the freezing haze, the Titanic fired white rockets instead of red distress signals. White rockets are for celebration. Red is for distress. Why the error? Was it a desperate attempt to signal a specific friend in the darkness? Even the ice damage itself is a point of major contention. Sonar shows the gash isn't a long tear, but a series of small punctures. This looks more like a hull weakened by a prior collision, the Olympics collision. But could a shipyard really swap every piece of engraved cutlery in just a few weeks? Every tile, every carpet, every ornate heater, it seems impossible. Or was the swap more surgical, focusing only on visible identifiers? The more we uncover, the more the Atlantic floor feels like a crime scene. If the ship down there is the Olympic, then the real Titanic lived on for decades. Disguised as her sister, it may have eventually been scrapped in 1935. But that means 1,500 people were sacrificed for an insurance claim. One final chilling detail remains that skeptics can't explain away. Explorers found a section where paint had peeled from the letters Titanic. Beneath them, they claimed to see the rusted outlines of the letters MPIC. The Titanic's final secret may still be resting 12,000 feet below. A corporate lie, frozen in the dark silence of the North Atlantic. The sight of those rusted letters, MPIC, shimmering beneath the peeling facade of the Titanic's hull. It serves as the ultimate ghost in the machinery of this tragedy. If the ship resting 2.5 miles down is indeed the Olympic, then the history books haven't just been written by the victors, they've been written by the conspirators. As you descend deeper into the cold, pressurized silence of the North Atlantic, the mystery shifts from what happened on the surface to what was happening in the shadows of the boardrooms. Why was the investigation handled with such surgical precision to avoid certain questions? Why were the most powerful men in the world suddenly absent from a voyage they had championed? You have to look at the manifest, not just of those who died, but of those who never showed up. J.P. Morgan, the titan of industry and the ultimate owner, had his own private suite booked. Yet, less than 24 hours before the ship set sail, Morgan canceled his trip, claiming ill health. Moments later, he was spotted in France, seemingly perfectly fine, watching his crown jewel steam away. He wasn't alone. Milton Hershey and other associates also pulled out at the last second. They stayed on the shore while their rivals, men like John Jacob Astor IV, boarded the ship. Astor and Guggenheim were vocal opponents of Morgan's plan for a Federal Reserve. They boarded the ship that would become their tomb. Was the Titanic a floating execution chamber for the enemies of the modern financial system? Every time you find a logical explanation, a new piece of evidence appears to tear a hole in it. Consider the SS Californian, the ship that was only 10 miles away as the Titanic was sinking. History has blamed Captain Stanley Lord for his inactivity, but new research suggests something calculated. The Californian was carrying no passengers, only 3,000 wool sweaters. It was sitting in the middle of the ice field, engines off, waiting. Some believe it was there as a rescue vessel for the Titanic, or rather, the Olympic. But in the pitch-black chaos of the night, the two ships missed their rendezvous. A controlled insurance scam turned into a mass slaughter. As you move through the debris field today, you see the remnants of human lives. A leather boot, a ceramic doll, a pocket watch frozen at 2:20 a.m. These are the silent witnesses to a crime that may never be prosecuted. The official British inquiry, headed by Lord Mersey, glossed over structural differences. It ignored reports of coal bunker fires raging in the Titanic's hull since it left Belfast. Fires that some believe were intentionally left to burn, weakening the steel. It was a whitewash designed to protect the reputation of the British merchant fleet. But the most haunting mystery isn't what we can find. It's what we are losing. A species of iron-eating bacteria, Halomonas titanici, is consuming the wreck. The iconic bow is collapsing. The captain's quarters have already vanished. Within 20 to 30 years, the Titanic will be nothing more than a rust stain. The physical proof of the switch is being erased by the environment. If the sinking was an inside job, if the Titanic was actually the Olympic, then the real Titanic lived out its life under a stolen name, eventually being scrapped in 1935. For 24 years, the world's most famous lost ship was actually sailing right in front of us, while the unsinkable legend lay rotting in the dark. As the lights of your submersible fade and you begin the long ascent back to the surface, you are left with a glacial truth. We live in a world built on narratives. The story of the Titanic is the most powerful narrative of the 20th century. But beneath the surface lies a darker tale of greed and corporate coldness. The Titanic didn't just hit an iceberg, it hit a conspiracy of silence. The water above the wreck is calm now, reflecting the stars just as it did in 1912. But the shadows below remain. The sea keeps its secrets, but the rust remembers.